Hello, well, thank you so much for coming and attending today. This is the Lunch and Learn, and myself and Gina Parnham are going to be talking to you about advising. I am going to be talking to you about the NCAA compliance and the advising of student athletes. My name is Suzanne Strudwick. I think I know some of you in the audience here, but I am the Associate Athletic Director of Compliance Administration. I'm also the SWA. That's just a fancy way of saying that I'm the Senior Woman Administrator, so I'm the voice, the woman's voice in the room of a lot of male administrators in the athletic department. So what I'm going to talk to you about is probably something that you're already doing, that the institution is already advising students. There are some slightly different nuances with student athletes, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about, the differences. So one of the biggest ones is that student athletes have to be enrolled in a minimum of 12 hours per semester. So, and that is new hours. So if they've received a D, or sometimes a professor doesn't like a C grade and will make them redo those, then they have to redo them. Those hours are not new hours. So when you're advising for the following semester and you know that they have to retake a class because of a D or a C grade, and that professor says, nope, we need to do that again, that is not new hours. So you must add those in addition to the 12 new hours that you're putting on that student athlete's schedule for the following year or semester. So they must have 12 hours, and that is not just for NCAA eligibility, but that is also for financial aid and for athletic aid. So during the semester, if they drop a class then and fall below that 12 hours, then they are ineligible to compete. And some of the issues that we've had is during the drop add date, a student athlete will come to you, you'll agree, let's drop this class. They drop it and then they say, but maybe I'll add one tomorrow. Well, let's say they have an event, a match that night. Technically, they are under the 12 hours, so they are ineligible. The penalties are pretty severe. If it's a team event, that team, if they win that match, is then null and void, because that student athlete has competed and they're ineligible. They are not a full-time student. So knowing that you're advising a student athlete, if they come to you and want to drop a class and you know that drops them below the 12 hours, they must immediately add a class to make up that difference. You can't wait until, say, 24 hours, 48 hours to investigate. Don't let them drop it until they've got a class that they can add straight away. So that's probably one of the biggest issues that we come across. And there have been cases even last year where student athletes competed less than full-time and those team events were null and void. So it hurts then in postseason, if it's a championship season, whether they qualify or not, if they've won enough games. Okay. Graduate students are 9 hours. They have to be in a minimum of 9 hours. Now, we've had in the past that those graduate students with the A and the B term, that they could enroll in, say, 6 hours, 2 classes in the A term, and not enroll straight away in the B term. Something then happens, and they either fail a class or they decide not to take a B term, and we come to do an audit halfway through the semester, and we realize they're only enrolled in 6 hours, 2 classes, and they haven't actually enrolled in that B term. That is then a problem. It's exactly the same. They're less than full-time, and so they are ineligible. And so even if they started the semester in enrolling in the 2 hours in the A term. But if Jessica Sweeney, the registrar, and myself, who certify every single student athlete, even if we see on their degree plan that they are meant to enroll in that B term, but they haven't, then we are going to mark them ineligible. Okay, so they must enroll in the 9 hours A and B term at the beginning of the semester. That is a new thing, new policy for this year. So for graduate students that are getting ready for the spring semester and you know that they are spring athletes, then that's going to be definitely something that needs to be on your mind. They must be enrolled in both A and B term at the beginning of the semester. Okay? With that, they have to maintain through the academic year a cumulative GPA of 2.0, okay? So in the fall, we certify once, and that's in the fall semester for GPAs. So if a student athlete right now in the fall semester falls below a 2.0, they're okay. They can still compete in the spring and practice and receive aid. They have until next fall to make it up. Okay, so the cumulative GPA, and you know, with term GPAs sometimes fall below that. We have that issue with some of the student athletes. They're okay as long as they get back up to a cumulative 2.0 by next fall. So that means they have fall, spring, and summer to recuperate that 2.0 GPA. Okay. So here comes the golden rule with the hours, okay? A student athlete must maintain or have for the next, to be eligible for the next academic year, earned 24 hours. And that's in total. So they have the fall semester, the spring semester, and summer to reach that golden rule of 24 hours. Each semester, they must maintain passing 9 hours. So out of the 12 hours that they're enrolled in, minimum, obviously we prefer about 15 hours for student athletes, just in case they fall below or want to drop a class. Then it still keeps them above that 12, or right on that 12. But out of that, they must then earn 9 hours each semester. If that's all they do is, say, in the fall, earn 9 hours, in the spring, earn 9 hours, then they must make up the difference in the summer with 6 hours. Right now, they're only allowed a maximum of 6 hours in the summer. That rule might be going away. That is one of the new rules that we're voting on in January 25 at the NCAA convention. I personally do not think our institution will vote for that, because you could have scenarios of student athletes needing 10 hours in the summer, and let's face it, how many of our student athletes are going to take 10 hours and pass 10 hours in the summer? Not very many. It's hard enough to get them to do 6. So we're not in favor of that rule, but it's all 246 D2 schools that vote, so we'll see where that goes. So watch this space. But right now, maximum of 6 hours in the summer. So if they've earned 18 hours after the 2 full-time semesters, after the spring semester, they must earn 6 hours to be eligible next fall. We have had instances, let's just pick on them, football, where they have tried to game the system. So it's a fall sport. So they try and go easy in the fall on their schedules and take what they perceive as the easy classes. And then in the spring, you know, they take all the harder classes. Well, that presents a problem because it's that spring semester that determines eligibility for the next fall. So if they don't pass 9 hours of the spring semester, they are ineligible the following fall, regardless of whether they've made the 24 or not. So each full-time semester, and summer is not a full-time semester, is then the criteria. They must pass 9 hours each of those two full-time semesters to be eligible the following full-time semester. So next spring, they must pass 9 to then get to compete next fall. So there's no way that we can kind of game the system. So my advice is just spread those harder perceived classes out in both semesters. Don't let them talk you into, oh, but this is my playing season. I'll go hard in the spring. It doesn't work. Okay, doesn't work. So let me see here. Yeah, let's go into the repeating classes that we've touched on already. So if you have a failed class, an F, that repeat is fine. It's considered with the NCAA as a new class, new hours. But the D and the C that may be needed to be repeated by the professor and for that degree are not considered fails. So they are, when those classes are repeated, they are old hours and will not count in the 12 hours. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Only freshmen are allowed to take up to 12 hours per semester in ASA classes. So only the freshmen, true freshmen, are allowed to take those hours and count for NCAA. Okay, and that's towards their degree, progress towards degree. New that started last year during the summer is that if a student athlete is taking a minor, any hours during the summer, any classes they took, would not count for the 24 if it was going towards their minor. For the last year and this year continuing, any hours that they take in the summer for that minor degree counts towards their 24. So, that is a good thing. That is obviously helps progress towards degree for those student athletes. If they're taking a minor and they want to wait and take hours during the summer, in the past, those hours did not count to the 24. They were like additional hours that just kind of disappeared. Now those count, so that is a good thing. Internships. For student athletes that are requiring, it's on their degree plan that they have to have an internship, make sure that those hours and the student athletes have signed off and taking that internship in the term that they've agreed upon. We had an issue last year with a student athlete that suddenly decided to take that internship the next full-time semester. Well, that put him at less than full-time. Plus, he was meant to get his degree at the end of that semester, which taking those hours were counted in the degree completion, and so they didn't count because he didn't take it. So it delayed his graduation, and he competed less than full-time, so the team was penalized. So it was a double whammy, and it was all because he decided that he wanted to put off his internship till the following semester, not realizing the ramifications of doing that on himself and on the team, okay? So one thing I think is really exciting and something that I think needs to be emphasized is that advisors and coaches are very much in a partnership with student athletes. You all have, very similar to coaches, a vested interest in their success. You're on the academic side, and obviously the coaches are on their athletic side, but also in their academics. I would say 95% of our coaches have master's degrees, so they take their academics very seriously. And they understand the importance that, especially at this school and in D2, that the students are students first, then they're athletes. And so they want what's best for the student athletes just as much as you do. Now, the relationships that have been built up through the recruiting process, so those coaches know parents, guardians probably a little bit more than you do, but so they have a little bit more background information, and they've had longer time to build those relationships. Student athletes tend to go to coaches first when they have an issue, even if it's academic. They will go and talk to their coaches first. And so that's just how it is. I think what has changed is that now, because Jessica Sweeney has been so kind and realized that there is an issue there, or there could be a little bit of a stumbling block, we have certified all the coaches in FERPA training. So they now have access to the advising tab in MyCN. They cannot alter or do anything, it's read-only, but they have access to that. What I would like for you to do is, after you've advised a student, an athlete, make some notes in the notes section of that advising. Now, I know the student athlete can read those, but the coaches can too. And it would really help with the communication. When that student athlete has an issue, they go to the coach is now going to look up and be able to see where they are in the advising if it's an academic issue. I know, because I've talked to the coaches, the number one thing they're going to say is, have you talked to your advisor? Have you talked to the professor? They are going to do that first. But they're also going to go in and have a look. If you've left some notes in there as like a breadcrumb for the coaches to kind of understand what is probably challenging to that student athlete, and maybe you've got a heads up on where they are, that will help. The coaches cannot add anything because, as I said, it's read-only, but at least they'll be able to see the notes that you've put in there, and then if they feel it's necessary to reach out to you personally, they will do that. And you are, now that they're FERPA trained, you can now discuss their academic progress with those coaches, okay? So they're cleared on that. So I think for the students' well-being, this is a really good thing that's happened, because there was some issues with, coaches, students going to coaches trying to get a little bit too involved with the advising of that student, and that, I promise you, they're nothing nefarious. They're just trying to help with that student athlete. But now it gives them a little bit more insight, and there's a little bit more communication between you and the coach, which I think is very important. Students ultimately have control over their schedules. And this comes straight down from the provost. So ultimately, when a student is trying to set their schedule, yes, they might have been advised by their coach to say, hey, we're going to try and have practice at this time, or weight training is at this time. So they might come to you and say, hey, yeah, but I've got, weight training at 6 o'clock in the morning. Is there, and I'd then like to go to an 8 o'clock class, but I need to be out by 1 o'clock. My coach wants to try and have practice by then. If they do that, there's nothing wrong with that, okay? The coaches understand that sometimes practices Yeah, we need to probably have them a little bit later than that. But there's also a lot of logistics going on. And that could be with basketball, volleyball right now. We've only got one gym. And so when 3 teams are trying to do practice, they can't all get there at 5 o'clock. Otherwise, somebody's going to be there at 9 o'clock at night, which is not good. So they typically work amongst themselves, those coaches, to figure out practice times for those 3 sports. I know some of the other sports that have their own dedicated facilities, like soccer. They've only got 2 teams that are working out there. But a lot of the issues also is that we've come across is in the weight training, sports conditioning. There's only so many sports trainers, strength conditioning trainers, and only 2 facilities. So when you've got 21 sports trying to work out of 4 strength conditioning coaches and 2 facilities, there is going to be some overlap. And those times, and all those student athletes are coming to you saying with suggestions on when possibly they could set their schedule. So working within those is kind of would be appreciated. Okay, if it's not at all possible and they need it, that class to be, that's no other time, you've got to take it, the coaches understand. There is those times, okay? For practice and competition, there are NCAA rules on these. The coaches are very well versed on this. They are not allowed to miss class for practice. They are allowed to miss class for travel if it's an away game. Obviously not for a home game, okay? But we have had issues, say, let's just pick on football, on when they have the Thursday night games, that the coaches wanted them out of class by 1 o'clock, and everybody was like, well, the game doesn't start till 6. But there's so many things, so they have to have their meal, team meal, that's important. Then they have to go to the athletic trainers to get taped. So there's so many issues that they have to go along that even though it's a 6 p.m. game start, it could be 4 to 5 hours of prep time to get ready for it. And so that's where you get that, excused time. But certainly for practice, they're not allowed to. If you've got teams like today, softball are leaving a little bit later, I think at 2:30, to travel down. They're playing UT today in a softball game. It's not their championship season, so it would be the bottom bylaw for no class time can be missed for out of season, non-championship season. Softball is a spring championship sport, so they cannot miss class. So the coaches said, okay, you're all going to travel in your own cars down to UT, because if you've got a class, then we're not going down in a bus. You travel on your own down there, and the game is later at 6. Okay, so that's how the coach is going to work. But if obviously the student athlete is out of class, then they can travel down at that time.